what I wanted to develop and share with you today is both from my research but also from my own experiences, and I want to share a bit of the practice and the theory to see how they compare as well. So I think that there's 5 stages an organisation goes through. It's not linear, and different incidents and crises can see an organisation move more rapidly, or different leaders can see an organisation go backwards as well. And every single stage will be represented in the room today. And I'll encourage you to sit there and, as I'm talking, think about, well, where does your organisation sit? And I know that for myself, I sit on 5 boards, and all of them are at different places in terms of their safety governance maturity. And why that is important is because the way I respond as a director is different in each of the cases. It's unrealistic if you're at a board that is purely compliance focused and your fellow directors are very focused on compliance and that's where the organisation sits. It's unrealistic for me to think that suddenly we're going to be very integrated, and it'll make more sense when I talk in a moment. So it is something for you to consider, and I'll be interested to talk to people in the break about whether or not it resonates for you and where your organisations might sit. So the first stage is what I've called transactional, and this is the least effective safety governance framework. This is where there's really a minimal emphasis on safety. Safety is seen by the board as management's responsibility, and safety really only comes to the board after there's been an incident. The concept of production over safety really drives the culture in that organisation. There's no real vision for safety. There might be some token words, but it's really, a walk around will show you that that's not what's happening in practice. Safety professionals in those organisations, they may not even be full-time. Often it's outsourced to a consultant, or there's just sort of someone's part-time job. Often, if there is a safety person, they're seen as responsible for safety. So line managers are reluctant to accept any responsibility. It's really all the safety guys' responsibility. So I'm sure everyone has thoughts about organisations that fit into this category. What we've seen in Australia, and no doubt what will happen here as well, or is happening, is that it's not sustainable. I mean, it's not even compliant with the law in many cases. And so those organisations are few and far between, but they still exist. The second stage then is probably where there's many organisations moving within New Zealand at the moment. And I'm doubtful that there's many here today, because going to a safety conference is probably going beyond compliance. You're just focused on what you have to do. In these organisations, boards are aware of their legal responsibilities. They've had the lawyers come in. They're very fearful of what it all might mean, and that really drives their approach to safety. So safety reporting is almost mirrored on the legislation. It's often only statistical reporting's focused purely on lag indicators. There's no real understanding of the benefits of lead indicators, or there'll be a view that it's impossible to come up with lead indicators in our particular situation. There's very basic safety policies in place, the generic ones that you read, and if you actually try to apply it in that organisation, it wouldn't work anyway. I heard someone laugh, so I'm glad everyone's experienced that. And compliance is the main driver. So there's no looking beyond that into what drives safety behaviours or safety leadership as a concept. But this phase, in my experience, doesn't last too long. On boards that I've been on where we've started at that place, given that there's many directors who don't get safety, there's a process they need to go through. And what I've experienced is after maybe a year or so, it's kind of a bit of a frustration with, well, so what? So what, you're telling me there's this many toolbox talks. What's it mean? How is that actually improving what we're doing? What's next? The trends might have plateaued, and there's really a question of, well, now what are we going to do? So the third stage is, I think, where organisations become more focused on safety, and I would expect that as a minimum, probably every organisation represented here today is focused at least on safety. And this is where, as I mentioned, boards are saying, well, okay, we're compliant, so we're actually not thinking about that anymore, thankfully. What else do we need to be doing? Because we're complying with the law, but we've still got people hurting themselves. We've still got people who may, unfortunately, be fatally killed at work. What's next? And this is where boards, I've seen, often demand more from management. So there's a bit of a shift. So safety might now be included in the board charter. Vision and safety targets now might be set. Lead indicators introduced very tentatively. There's a greater focus on where the safety professional in the organisation actually sits. So are they visible? Are they 3 levels below the CEO, or where is it that they fit? And safety management systems are introduced. Now the 4th stage is what I've called proactive, and I think this is the most interesting stage. And there's a board that I'm involved with where we're there at the moment, and there's a real shift where there's a bit of tension because after being very focused, management and executive team have done a tremendous job of moving forward, and you'll have the boards now taking a much more proactive role. So you might have directors who sit on other boards who see different things being done, and they want even more out of their senior executive teams. The board themselves are much more comfortable in their role in safety leadership. So a board subcommittee might be formed around this stage. The chairman might be making personal commitments to safety in his letter to shareholders in their annual reports. Everyone understands lead indicators, might have had them for a little while now, and you're refining them and getting them a lot better. And the safety professionals are either a direct report through to the CEO, or they're reporting directly to the board at their monthly meetings. Now the final stage, and I have encountered organisations at this stage, they're rare and it's hard to sustain it, is the other thing, but it's possible. And the most effective organisations, I believe, are where safety is completely integrated with the operations of the organisation. So business excellence is understood to be an output of safe production. The concept of safe production is understood and accepted by the board. People see where there's contrary messages being put out about safe production. There's cascading safety committees, so you've got your board subcommittee all the way down to in the field, and there's representatives on each, up and down. Line managers understand and embrace their responsibility for safety. They're no longer just delegating it to the safety team.